So in January, I had a TBR of about 15 books. But I could only read 4 of those books because I was in a reading slump in January. And then my dumb ass decided that last month I was going to read 28 books because I was participating in a lot of readathons, and I also wanted to win the booktube games for my team. Spoiler alert, we did not win, although I did have a lot of fun. And so I decided I was going to do the crazy thing and read 28 books, forgetting the fact that I was still partially in a reading slump. And unfortunately, these were all the books I was able to read in February. Okay, I did also read a couple of audiobooks and a couple of comics, but in all, I read 13 books all through February, which is a lot because December I read a lot of books and I read 14 books. But compared to the 28, it's small. But then I have to remind myself that January's eventual reading month was not even up to a third of the amount of books I wanted to read in January. And I got halfway through the books I wanted to read in February, which means I am slowly getting out of my reading slump. Hello everybody, Noria back again. Like I said, I only read 13 books in February, which is a lot when you think about it. Like, if I'm being honest, because I did have a very ambitious TBR, but I actually am pretty proud and satisfied with the books I read this month because I found a couple of favorite books. And when I say favorite books, I mean like these books will make it to my top 10, 20 books of 20 that I read in 2019, because I read a lot of fantastic books last month, and I also read some not so okay books, but we'll talk about it. I would leave the timestamp and with the book and the corresponding timestamp in the description below, so you can just skip. You don't need to watch the entire video. You can just skip to which books you are interested in hearing my thoughts about. Like, these are not in-depth reviews, but these are just my wrap up. I do intend to do more reviews this month, hopefully, because last month I was all about the booktube games and I was pretty focused on that. So the very first book I read in February was Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. Now, Sawkill Girls is basically all about the girls of Sawkill, Sawkill being a town. Basically, every couple of years, a teenage girl goes missing in Sawkill, and after people search for her and look for her a while, and then the search dies down, give it a couple more months, and then another girl goes missing. And it's basically a story about teenage girls banding together in order to fight against the patriarchy, in order to fight against the power that would treat girls as dispensable. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I first started this book, I was bored out of my damn mind. I was like, this book took so long, I didn't know what was happening, there was some spooked out horse, the girl got into town, and then she just started having headaches, and then you had another creepy girl who was gorgeous, and then you had the black girl who was nosy, and I'm like, what exactly is this book about? But if you stick with it, the payoff is so glorious and so fantastic. And I initially thought that the villain was your cookie cutter. Oh, I want to collect souls. Oh, I want to do this type of villain. But that is not the case, because the villains in Sawkill Girls, because when you read the story, you realize that there are more than one villain. You have the parental villain, you have the human villain, you also have a villain that was centuries old. And when I say centuries old, I'm not talking about the collector, I'm talking about a promise that was made by a woman who had been spurned by society, who had been maltreated and wanted power, and did not understand exactly what she was sacrificing by asking for that power. And the fact that she was manipulated into making that decision, the fact that she had no choice, that her life was threatened, everything about her was threatened, and she had to appeal to someone who was stronger and better than her in order to help out of her circumstance, and she did not know what she wrote into existence by agreeing to that. Told a lot. It told a lot about, the contracts we make and how binding it is when it is that we do not have a full picture, and how that effect reverberates through our entire lineage. It's really deep. It's really deep. It also talks about, like I said, how teenage girls are sacrificed on the altar of power, how adult men are willing to, treat teenage girls as being dispensable. They don't really see them as people in their own rights. They are just things to acquire in order to help them get more things. And I do know that there was a lot of people were worried about the fact that, oh my god, this thing is really it's man 18, Claire Legrand hates men. But I don't really think it was written as like, oh, she hated men. I think it was just her recognizing the fact that a lot of the atrocities that are committed against girls, against teenagers, are actually, a lot of them are done by men. Not all of them are done by men, as you can see in the case of Val's story, but most of them are committed by men. And it's just sad. It's sad because it's the truth, and it's sad because it's real. I enjoy the fact that this book was also about girl power. Like, this was about teenagers finding their power in order to push back against a society that will consider them dispensable, that will consider them not strong. Each one of them had their individual strength. All three banded together, and you know, it took that common trope of girls not liking each other, which I always have a problem with in books. Like, you know, that old stereotypical girls hate each other, girls are jealous of each other, whatever. It took that trope and turned it on its head, because yes, although two of these girls started this book hating each other, by the time we finished this book, they were so devoted to each other that they were able to put aside their differences to fight and accomplish a common goal. So yes, girls do not totally lose their mind and sabotage each other when there's something that they need to get done. Thank God for that. My problem with the book though was the fact that the black character, Zoe, we didn't really get a feel of Zoe. Like, she was, if not for the fact that she mentioned, Claire mentioned once or twice that she was black, I totally would not have even figured out that she was black. Like, and I'm not saying that, oh yes, I wanted a blackness front and central in the story, but it was in the little things. Even just descriptions. Like, we kept hearing about how long-limbed and blonde Val was, and how Marion was pale-skinned and brown-eyed, and Zoe just got like a couple of description of, oh, she dyed her afro like red and black, and then, oh, she's black a couple of times. That was it. And I just, if you skip that point, you will not even know that Zoe was black. That was just my problem with the book. I did enjoy the fact that this book had quite a lot of rep. Marion is plain, she's bisexual, she's on the plus side. Val is queer, Zoe is asexual. But I also love the fact that although this book is chock full of reps, like, the rep was not who they were, like all they were, right? Like, Marion was bi, yes, she was bi, she was fat, but she was also steady, you know. She was also steady, she was also calm, she was also grounded. Zoe was asexual, but she was also black, and she was also loyal, and she also, you know, she had this inquisitive mind, and she was also slightly rash, she was slightly flawed. You also had Val, who is queer, but also you know, could be vindictive but also loyal, and was also dealing with abuse at home. And I just like the fact that none of these characters were monoliths. They all had other things going for them, you know, other than the fact that they were queer, or they are ace, and they are black, and they are plain. Like, I really enjoyed that. So after I finished Sawkill Girls, I read the second book of the month, and this book just, it skyrocketed its way and made its way to like my top books of the year, and that was Becoming by Michelle Obama. Now, I listened to this on audiobook, and I would 10 over 10 recommend you listening to this on audiobook, because hearing her tell her story using our own words and in our own voice, it was like you were sitting at dinner with a friend, an old friend who was catching you up on her life and on her decisions and where she was coming from and where she's been and where she intends to go. Like, it was a joy to listen to. I felt chills because it was like she was right there, and she was pouring me a glass of wine, and we were catching up like old friends. Now, Becoming is, I have a little thing about memoirs, because I read a lot of them. Usually I actually listen to a lot of them because I like listening to memoirs on audiobook. I listen to a lot of memoirs, and there's one thing that always strikes true for me with memoirs: your honesty. I have to be able to see the honesty and vulnerability, because I think that some people tend to hide bits of themselves when they are writing memoirs, which does not make it as authentic as it should be. I also think that I also think that sometimes some people just, they show us the how but not the reasons why. to their decisions, to who they became. Becoming did all of that and more. And I'm going to start by saying, I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to just go straight out and admit it. I have always been a huge fan of Michelle Obama. I have always loved her grace. I've always loved her charisma. I've always loved her mind. I've always loved how intelligent she sounds. And I've always loved her resilience, because she dealt with so much shit while she was the first lady, that and she carried everything with such grace and such poise that I'd always loved her. And so when I had the opportunity to listen to her memoir, I wanted to find out who Michelle was. Not Michelle the first lady, not Michelle the wife of Barack, not Michelle the mother of Malia and Sasha. I wanted to find out about Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama, who she was. And this book more than delivered. On Becoming Me, when she talked about, her life growing up, what inspired her, her values, this precocious child who always had questions, who needed for things to make sense, who was brilliant, and who was brilliant and who was always unafraid to speak her mind, to her first loves, her entering university, the friends she made along the way, who helped her understand, or who gave her a glimpse of what life in politics would be like, who helped her understand that life is short and you should live it to the fullest. All the influences she had in her life, from her friends to her Aunt Robbie to her grandparents to her parents to her brother, like all of these things came together to make Michelle who she is. And we ended on this sneak peek, this cliffhanger, into her meeting the man who will become the love of her life, the father of her children, the 44th president of the United States. And then we go into Becoming Us, and here she delves straight into the meat of things, how she met Barack, how they first became friends, how she was not interested in him, how she fell in love, how they started dating, their relationship, how they made long distance work, how they finally got engaged, all the highs and lows of their relationship. She bared it all, the vulnerability and honesty and truth, the way in which she actually told a story. I found myself being so emotional, because the way in which we've seen Barack and Michelle all their lives has always been, this perfect couple, this power couple, these people that we've kind of seen from afar. We've admired them, we've loved them, but we've seen them from afar. And Michelle just pulls back the curtains and this is my life, this is our life, this is how we've loved, this is how messy we've been. Like, the part where she talks about how they had to go out, how they had to do IVF because she had difficulties conceiving, or when she was talking about how they had to go for counseling because she had started resenting Barack, when she was talking about how he was never home, his problem with always saying that, oh, he's almost home, and then when you realize that when he says he's almost home, it does not mean he's actually on his way. It means like somewhere in his mind he's with you, but he's not physically making plans to get to you soon. And the frustration she felt. Like, I think I love this book more because she did not hide that. Because she helped us to see that their marriage was not perfect, but they made it work. She helped us see that motherhood was not easy, but she made it work. She helped us to see that it was not easy for her to give up, years and training of her, like having a career in corporate law, and then walking away from that because that was not giving her satisfaction. That was not what she wanted to do. And she went out to find out what she wanted to do. And even though, it terrified her, and she did not hide that, because she was making comfortable money. She was on a fast track to becoming partner in a law firm. And she spoke about, the terror she felt about having to let those dreams go and starting afresh. And she did that. And I love this book. I can wax lyrical about this book. She spilled the tea, and it was glorious to sip and to enjoy. This is 19 hours long, and I finished this in like a little over a day, to show you how engrossed I was in this book. Sure, it was on 1.75 speed, but I was still engrossed, and I cannot wait to re-listen to it over and over again because Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama is an inspiration, and she's one of a kind. Next, I listened to Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which was read by Rosamund Pike, and it was a reread again. I don't know, at this point, I think I reread this book like once a year. It was a reread, and as always, I loved it. Elizabeth Bennet would always be the love of my life and the queen of my heart. I, as always, loved her wit, her intelligence, her good nature, her loyalty, her sarcasm, her good humor, and as well as a willingness to course correct when she says that, okay, all her prejudices and all her assumptions have been false. As in, Elizabeth Bennet is the kind of person that once she realizes that, holy shit, she has been wrong, some people will stick to their guns and be like, I refuse to apologize, I refuse to believe that I've done wrong. But no, she immediately course corrects, and this is a quality and a trait I aspire to. Like, I love Elizabeth Bennet. I love Elizabeth Bennet. I also loved Mr. Darcy, as always. His social awkwardness that was always read as aloofness, his willingness to go through any lengths to fix things for the woman he loves, his loyalty to his friend, and his loyalty to his sister. I just love Mr. Darcy. And I also love Mr. Bennet just because, like, I love his relationship, his father-daughter relationship with Elizabeth, and I love the fact that she's clearly his favorite, maybe because she's also my favorite. Miss Bennet has always got on my nerves, my poor nerves. You get it? You get it? You get it? Okay, fine, I'm leaving that. If you didn't get it, I'm sorry. And Lydia, I always, as always, I wanted to shake the truth into her head, like, that girl, like, I know she's 15, I know she's a child, but that girl has zero sense. And Wickham, as always, and I will always say this, got way better and way more than he deserved, the absolute prat. Such a dick. Jane, I love Jane. I love her good nature. I wish sincerely that she did not always see the good in people. But, you know, sometimes I do think that we need people like her in this world. I just enjoyed it. I loved seeing the characters again. It was like coming back home and seeing old friends. And I just, it left me warm and happy. I love Pride and Prejudice. And I just went all about the things I loved running into again about the book without saying what the book is about. The book is just basically that, you know, it talks about, you know, Pride and Prejudice. The pride of Mr. Darcy and the prejudice of Elizabeth Bennet, and how they each overcame both to fall in love and build a life together. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I did give Becoming 5 stars, of course, and Pride and Prejudice 5 stars, of course. And then the next book I read was To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, which I listened to on audiobook. I'm going to admit it, I watched the movie first. I watched the Netflix movie, and I loved it. I've watched that Netflix movie like 5 times, you guys. That's how much I love it. And so I love the Netflix movie, and I went into this book knowing that I was most likely going to love the book. And I'm proud to admit that I love the book. Like, I gave it 4.5 stars because I love it that much. I love how warm it was. Warm and sweet and just precious and cute. I loved seeing the relationship between the Sawkill Girls, you know, how it is that no matter what any of them did, they would always forgive and accept each other. I love seeing Margot being a big sister to Lara Jane, who in turn was a big sister to Kitty. I love how, you know, each one of them, you know, were ultimately there for one another, helping each other be happy and be happy. And I enjoyed that part. I also related so much with Lara Jean because 16-year-old me did not have a big sister whose boyfriend she had a crush on, but 16-year-old me had a crush on the boy first, and then I found out that my best friend liked him. My best friend then, anyway, liked him too. And just like Lara Jean, I did not write my feelings for him out of the equation. I just had to basically push myself out of like my crush, and then I just match-made both of them because they liked each other, and it was just so cute. So yes, I think that younger me, 16-year-old Noria, would love this book, and adult Noria already loves this book. So I really enjoyed that. I loved seeing how Lara Jean sounds young, right? Which is something like a lot of A lot of writers, especially when they're writing teenage girls, I don't know, to me, they just seem to age them up. Lara Jean, though, her voice, her fears, her concerns, her choices, the things that made her happy, the things she wanted to do, read like a 16-year-old. I enjoyed reading that. I could visualize her in my head that she was me, or rather I could have been her at that age, you know, like I found it very believable, which I usually don't for a lot of writers that claim that their characters are 16. I also loved the fact that I watched the movie first because it helped with the visualization. Not gonna lie, a lot of the characters that showed up in my head while I was listening to the book were definitely the characters I saw in the movie. Those that helped with me picturing it. And I did not appreciate the fact that there was a cliffhanger. I'm very thankful that the movie ended, so I know that, okay, yes, that happened. But I do have the remaining books, and I do intend to, pick up the next book in March. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Now, I just went all about, the feelings I had for the book. Now, what was To All the Boys I Loved Before about? It's basically about Lara Jean Covey, who every single time she likes a boy, she writes him a letter, and she wants to get over her crush. She writes him a letter, a detailed letter about the things she loves about him, and including some flaws. And then she addresses it but never sends it, because it's the act of writing it down that helps her get over the crush, not the actual sending, except unfortunately something happens. And I like to point out that what led to those letters being sent was so believable. I appreciated that than like the way they did it in the movie, because the reason why it happened in the book for me made more sense. It was more believable than the reason why it happened in the movie. Now, if you've read the book and watched the movie, you understand what I'm talking about. If you've not, you should read the book and check out the movie so you can understand what I'm talking about. But I'm just stating, and I'll state it again and again, that I found it more believable, the reason why it happened in the book than it did in the movie. Anyway, so as I was saying, what the book is about. So one day, our letters get mailed, and all the boys she's loved before get our letters, and shit hits the fan. And then, of course, there is one of my favorite trope in books and movies and series and anything possible: the pretend relationship. The next book I read in February was Pride by Ibizoboy. Now, Pride is a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and the thing about retellings for me is that they walk a pretty thin line. I always find it fascinating to see what writers would do, how they would tweak things, how they will make the story their own, how they would improve upon it, or how they would adapt it to fit whatsoever story they're telling. And sometimes, they pull it off. They do give their own spin to a beloved story, and they make and for me, like, I end up loving their stories even more, almost as much as I love the original. Sometimes I've even loved some retellings more than I have the original. And then there are the other times when it is that a writer aspires to tell a story, to do a retelling of a story, and it falls flat on its face because there are certain things that maybe they didn't keep the spirit of the story, they didn't keep what made the story what it was, and hence it did not work in the retelling. And for me, it's even more tricky when the story you're doing a retelling of is one of my favorite stories of all time. And that was unfortunately my experience with Pride by Ibizoboy, which I ended up giving 2 stars. And it breaks my heart because I've been looking forward to reading this book. And when I finally read it, god damn. Okay, do you know what? Let me first start with the things that worked for me in this book. I loved the diversity of the characters. I love how Ibizoboy brought it into modern times. Like, the Benitez's are a Dominican Haitian household, and I love the fact that this was not just in their name, it was in their foods, their names, the nicknames they called each other, the festivals, the parades, the parties, the music they listened to. I love reading all about this Afro-Latinx family who had strong pride both in their heritage and in Bushwick where they lived. I love how it was that we could Ibizoboy was able to paint this in vivid color. Like, I was there, I was in Bushwick, I was living with them, I was eating their food. I read this book on an empty stomach, and let me tell you, that was torture because I was starving. So everything was so vivid and done so well. I loved every moment of that world building. I love the fact that, you know, unlike in the original where Mrs. Bennet was basically written to be an heir in a marriage with a man who barely tolerated her and disrespected her most of the time. Unlike that, Mrs. Benitez and Mr. and Mrs. Benitez were in love, and it was visible, it was palpable. I enjoyed reading that. I love the fact that she was as devoted to her husband and her family as she was in getting, you know, her children in a satisfying relationship. I also loved, you know, there's something else I love about retellings. I love retellings and then trying to figure out, you know, who is who from the original. Like Zuri, Zizi Benitez, of course, is Elizabeth. Jane becomes Janae. Mary becomes Marisol. Wickham becomes Warren. Like, I just loved reading all of that. I also love the fact that Ibizoboy turned that trope of black people are only rich and wealthy if they are ballers or rappers or musicians, and she used Zuri to push that message. Like, it's not just in rapping it's not just in entertainment or sports that black people can make money. They can make money, you know, like in investment banking, in real estate, etc. And I loved reading that. I love that. My problem with Pride is that I do believe that it was too short. I do believe that 200 and how many pages is it? 289, I think. Yeah, I do believe that 289 pages is too short a number of pages to do a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, because it made sure that everything was rushed. Like, okay, see, the original was long. That was a long book. And the reason why it was so long was because, you know, it gave the story time to breathe, and everything happened organically. We were able to see her relationship with her feelings for Mr. Darcy evolve, you know, from disinterest to dislike to hatred to love, and it was organic. It took its time. Each of those phases, we paused a while, we breathed, we understood why she felt that way. And if you're rereading it, you smile because you know what is coming. But we didn't get that in this book. Everything was rushed, from the very first instant dislike of Darius to the immediate hatred, and then all of a sudden she's spending time with him in Washington, and then and then all of a sudden she's dating him, and then they're having their first fight, and then their first fight is resolved almost immediately after. Like, everything was happening at this incredibly way too fast speed, and the story just did not take its time to settle. And I think that in itself did it a disservice, because if it had been maybe 400 pages, it probably would have worked better for me, because then I would have known that, okay, Juliet, like, this story is taking its time. But it did not. It just rushed through. I also felt that the limited amount of pages also meant that the themes of the original, that, you know, had been modernized to fit the story. So, for example, the class structure, the class system, you know, the structures that have been put in place, the gentrification of Brooklyn, all these themes and stories that Ibizoboy was trying to tell with the book, she was not really able to fully flesh them out, in my opinion, because of, like I said, the really short pages. Like, this book could have done it, and I was so looking forward to reading that, but all these things were just picked up and dropped so fast, and it just, like I said, it did not take its time to settle. There was just no time. Everything was too rushed. And then, like, I spent so much time wondering why it was that I did not like Zuri so much, and then it clicked. The original Elizabeth Bennet had humor. She was haughty, she was proud, she had a quick wit, you know, she always had that instant comeback, but she had a good humor. Elizabeth went through the world like there was an inside joke she knew that everybody else did not know. That elevated the story because she was so good-natured. But Zizi did not have that good humor, and I think that was what made some of her actions read way more hypocritical and brash than they actually were. She lacked humor. I did enjoy the poetry, like the poems and the way Zizi was crafting them, I really love that. I wish that I'd listened to the book on audio, because I know it was read by Elizabeth as a video, and she's a spoken word artist, and I think that she probably would have elevated the story for me if I'd listened to it on audiobook. I also, the part with Howard University and Zizi wanting to get into Howard, like, I felt that it was dropped too fast. It still goes back to what I said, and that the story was just too short to contain all of this and treat them well, because I love the part of Howard University. Like, that was what Zizi had been working towards all throughout the book. That's the very first thing we saw. That was the very first thing we read about when she started, her wanting to get to Howard. And I just felt that was dropped too quickly and not resolved as well. Like, I know this is an happily for now story. It's not like it's not like an happily ever after story where everything is resolved and all tidied up in bows. But like, getting into Howard was as central to her character as the story that was being told, and I just felt that it did her character a disservice because we did not follow through on that. And I also had a problem with the fact that Warren should not just be dealing with a broken nose. That boy should be going to jail. I am just saying, like, if I thought Wickham got away with the stupid shit he did in the original, another reason why I was looking forward to retelling was because I thought that, okay, do you know what, he would finally get his comeuppance in the retelling, but he did not, which I had a problem with. Next, I read the very first graphic novel I finished in February, and that was Abbott, now volume 1. I love the fact that Abbott is a comic that basically you don't see coming. Like, okay, the premise is pretty simple. Elena Abbott is a black reporter in a city where she's one of the few black reporters in the entire city and the only black reporter in her newspaper, and she's dealing with the racism and sexism inherent in the time. And you already think that you have everything figured out until, boom, you're hit out of left field with the fact that this is not just all about telling, reporting crime and reporting stories. It's also about the occult, because 1 minute you're dealing with a story about a horse that was severed from the waist up, and next thing a creature, something that looks like it's straight out of the portals of hell, is chasing Elena Abbott. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that this was not just a reporting, like, that was actually what I expected. I did not expect to have to deal with the occult, and I enjoyed it because your girl loves everything mysticism and fantasy. And I love the, okay, I'm not going to, I'm trying not to spoil anything, but I enjoyed seeing that happen. I loved Elena Abbott. This is a kick-ass, badass black woman. She loves a good brandy. She's very relentless in, like, getting things done. She's bi. Yes, Elena Abbott is bisexual. Thank gay Jesus. And she's tough as nails. She would not take no for an answer. And when it is that, even when everybody around her is telling her to slow down, Elena has to follow through. She's jaded enough and hardened enough to ensure that nothing shakes her from the path she's set on, especially when she wants to tell a story, especially when she's reporting about injustice that a lot of people want to sweep under the rug, because a lot of those injustices are happening, like, to black people in Chicago in 1972. And I also love the fact that even though she's tough as nails and she's very hardened, she's also very vulnerable. We have vulnerable moments with her. We have the moments when she's, like, with friends and people she cares about, and also, of course, when she remembers, like, the love of her life. And I love reading that about her. I love the fact that she was not your typical good girl type heroine. Like, Elena Abbott is older, very wizened. You can tell that she's seen it all, but she keeps getting out of bed and she keeps getting her job done. And even though the cops hate her because she's unafraid to say the truth, she just keeps pushing forward. And I love that about her. I also loved, meeting Amelia Chi. Amelia is bae. Like, both Elena and Amelia had such badass, like, openings, like, introductions. Like, I fell in love with both of them at different points in time in the comics. Like, I love them. My problem with Abbott it's quite similar to my problem with pride in that a lot of things were rushed. Like it was just, I think it was just 5 issues, and the story just sped through too fast. Which I know it's probably because it's a new comic and they're trying to establish the world and the characters as soon as possible, but I think it did the story a disservice. Even 1 or 2 extra issues in that volume would have helped pace things better. I also had a problem with the fact that the villain was just your cookie cutter, ooh, I am evil for the sake of being evil villain, and like black people should all die, they like, they serve me, that kind of thing. Like I do know that people like that exist, but I wish the villain had just a little bit more depth, because it didn't. And also because, like I said, the story was so rushed. We only got a quick glimpse of the villain, and then we got him in like 1 issue, and that was the end of it. And I'm like, everything just resolved too fast. The entire pacing was just way too fast, but I did enjoy it, and I did give it a 3.5 stars. And I'm looking forward to when volume 2 is out, because now that we've established the world and established the characters, something tells me that we'll not be able to spend time delving and probably properly fleshing out the stories that will be told going forward, and I'm looking forward to that. The next book I read in February was Sadie by Courtney Summers, which I listened to on audiobook, and let me just say, wow, oh god. Firstly, Sadie definitely making it to one of my top books of 2019. That book was hard to listen to, and if you get the opportunity, if you get the chance, like even if it is that you have the physical copy, I would suggest and highly recommend you listening to it on audiobook, because the audiobook of Sadie is an experience in itself. Like, it's not just the fact that it has a full cast, like it's a full cast, you're different people voicing the different characters. It's magnificent. It's not just that it has a full cast, it's the little things that go into the background sound, the grainy voice of someone over the phone, the sound of passing cars, the sound, the scratchy voice that comes from a recorded message. All these little things elevate the story, elevate the performance, the audio performance, and I fell in love. That audiobook is perfection. The story itself is devastating. What the fuck? Like, I finished Sadie like maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't recovered, because that book is depressing. Very depressing. Now, what is Sadie about? Sadie is a story about a girl whose younger sister is murdered and then who goes missing. And we spend the entire book trying to, because the book is told through 2 different mediums. So the first medium is a podcast, Wes's podcast titled The Girls, where he's trying to piece together Sadie's story while trying to find her and what happened to her. And then the second medium is Sadie's own voice herself. Like, she tells her story, and we try to figure out where those individual stories intersect as we try to paint a bigger picture of exactly what happened. And wow. Now, firstly, let me just say, speaking of voice, Sadie is rightfully angry. Her sister was brutally murdered, and she knows who the killer is, and she's out there to try and get justice for her sister. But then she goes missing as well. And it's just, I loved listening to Sadie's voice, because here is someone who has been brutalized, but who is filled with a righteous hunger to get justice served. And speaking of voice, Sadie has a severe stutter, which I did not know going into this book, and I loved seeing that, because I can't even remember if there had been any other if there had been any other book where like any of the main characters had a severe stutter the way Sadie did. I can't think of any other, and that's what for me was a pleasant surprise, just as much as I was pleasantly surprised to discover like that Sadie is kind of pan. Like, I enjoyed seeing that as well. But this book those were the only happy moments for me as I was listening to this book, because it is so real to life. Like, this book basically helps us talks about, okay, first let me just say that there are a ton of triggers for this. There's pedophilia, there's rape, there's parental neglect. Like, there are so many. There's violence in that. There's also death. All of them depicted in the book, although not told in full. And I think that that's what makes it so even more devastating. Like, Courtney Summers did not need to give us a play-by-play retelling of what happened. She shows us the aftermath, and it's so much more devastating because you see the end result and you know what led to this, and you can see what the scars that this entire experience has left on this girl, on this young woman, as she like steps forward. And it's so heartbreaking. Sadie is a story about girls, about how easy it is to victimize and brutalize them, how easy it is to mute their voices, because although they are the most vulnerable members of the society, they are also the most discarded, the most easily abused. This story also talks about how, monsters, the monsters that live amongst us, human monsters, always wear human faces, and you never really expect them to be monstrous until you find out what it is that they've done. And it was just such a heartbreaking book to read. I don't want to spoil it because, trust me, this is a book you want to go in blind when you're reading. But I do want to state that I know a lot of people had a problem with the ending, but I loved the ending of this, because nothing in life is resolved. And if there's anything the book Sadie was all about trying to be as human and as real to life as possible. And I think that ending was just, it fits. It was heartbreaking, it was sad. We still had so many unanswered questions, but it fit. And as expected, I did give Sadie a full 5 stars. And then I read An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Now, I gave this book a 3.5 stars. I actually enjoyed it, which was funny because when I started, this book started so slow. Oh my god, this book started so slow. I kept losing my thoughts. I kept getting bored. I considered dropping it and reading it at another time. But I'm so happy I stuck with it, because when it picked up, oh my god, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful story to read. Now, I've never hid the fact that I am a huge fan of stories of the Fae. Just tell me that there's a Fae in a story and you can bet your ass I'm going to read it. Also, the same thing if you say that there are assassins in the story, or dragons, or thieves, or found family trope, or something like, or enemies to lovers. Like, I have a lot of loves when I'm looking for books to read, and the Fae stories are one of them. And when I found out that An Enchantment of Ravens was all about the Fae, I enjoyed it. Now, what is this book about? This book is basically about a girl, Isobel. She's an artist, she's a painter, and basically she does paintings for the Fae who come to her house and give her payment in form of enchantments. Now, the Autumn Prince, Rook, comes to her house to get his painting done, and Isabel paints a human emotion into his eyes, and that is a big no-no because he kidnaps her and drags her into like the Fae realms in order for her to answer for her crimes. And yeah, that's basically the story. And along the way they go from I cannot stand you to I am in love with you. Now, let me go straight to the one thing I really loved about this. Like, there's some things I liked, there's some things I enjoyed, but what I really loved about this book was Rook. Yes, the Fae Prince Rook. Rook was wise and self-absorbed and pompous and adorable and utterly oblivious about the ways of human craft, and also so freaking childlike, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed reading about that. I enjoyed seeing that in the book. I think definitely one of my favorite Fae princes. I could spend 2 books reading all about Rook, finding out about human craft and human ways, and then they befuddle him and he's a bit confused, and then he realizes at the last moment that, holy shit, wait, hold up, I'm the Autumn Prince, I am not impressed by this, and then he just pumps himself up and just pretends like, oh, he was not in awe a couple of seconds ago, even though his ass has already totally been busted. Like, I enjoyed reading that about Rook. I actually also loved Isabel, the character. I loved how consistent our character was. Like, she's kind, yes, she's kind, she's selfless, she's loyal, she's loving, she's very brilliant and very talented at what she does, but at the same time she's never taken in by fake beauty, and she sticks to her refusal, to be accepting of an eternity of beauty because of the fact that it would lose who she is, like who she actually is, and who she is vital to her character. And I love the fact that that was consistent from the beginning of the book. She did not sway, she did not change her mind, she stuck to her guns from the beginning to the end, and I appreciated that about her. Now, my problem with the book, kind of like a lot of books I read this month actually, maybe it's because I tend to read big books, but my problem with the book is the fact that the pacing, like, this was so rushed. Now, I am not a fan of insta love, and I do believe that if if Margaret Rogerson had taken a bit of time to flesh out the story, then I probably would have had enough time, and then Rook and Isabel's feelings would have grown organically rather than the almost insta love we were giving. Like, 1 minute she hated him, and then the next minute he was saying he loves her, and then a couple of minutes later she loved him, and I'm like, yeah, I know you have been together and alone for days even, but how, girl, how? Like, I had a problem with that. Yes, I know. I found it unbelievable that they fell in love so quickly, even though I totally find it believable that there are faith that exists in our world. Yeah, screw me. I think the pacing was rushed. I think the pacing also affected the villain in the story, because the villain shows up like, okay, sure, there's a mention of him in like a page, like way earlier, but he shows up in the last 30 pages of the book, and then like everything was resolved so quickly, which I still say goes to the pacing and the size, because it was just too small. Like, that was one thing I was worried about. The minute I learned that this was a standalone book and that it was so short, I was worried about how the story would be told. And although I enjoyed the story, I would have loved it even more if we had had, a bit more time, and if the characters had been a bit more fleshed out. Even though I did like Rook, and I did like Isabel, I do think that things with Gadfly, for example, were a bit rushed. Things with the Elder King was a bit rushed. Like, there were just a bit too many rushed moments. But I did enjoy the conclusion, the resolution. I loved the way it was resolved. And I definitely miss the fact that we did not get enough of March and May, who were toad swallowing, goat turned sisters. Yes, I did say toad swallowing, goat turned sisters. That's a thing in this book. That's a thing in this book, and they were adorable, and I miss them. And that's the thing about short standalones, like, they are too short. What this means, of course, is that I'm going to get Priory of the Olwyn Tree, because that book is a mammoth of a book, and I know that everything will be resolved, and I cannot wait to read it. Just saying that. But yes, like I said, I gave this a 3.5 stars. I will definitely be reading it again, because several times actually, because I actually did enjoy it. And then I read The Love of My Life. Oh my god, The Wicked King by Olive Black. Like, everybody read this book in January, and they had thoughts and opinions, and I remember I was confused as to why they had thoughts and opinions. What were the things I missed, until I finally got the chance and the opportunity to read this book. And now I understand, because one, this was a great second book. Like, a lot of writers have a problem with their second book, especially if it's a trilogy, not a duology, a trilogy, because the second book for a lot of writers is always like the in-between book, a filler book where nothing really happens, nothing is really resolved, and you're just, that they're just biding their time until they get to the third book, and then everything happens and there's an explosion. This does not read like filler. This reads like utter perfection. Like, I love The Wicked King. Now, I loved seeing, the fact that it's like Murdoch told Jude, power is easy to acquire, but difficult to keep. And this book is all about Jude fighting to keep the power, she manipulated, people like chess pieces in order to get. Jude trying to, avoid getting manipulated and still getting manipulated in turn. Everybody comes into their own as a strategist in this book, which I enjoyed and I absolutely loved. I loved Jude. I love my girl Jude. I will fight for her. I will defend her. I love the fact that, we still got a view into her brilliant mind. I love the fact that we still went deeper into this enemies to lovers trope, because they still resent each other, but the passion, like, there are scenes in this book, people. Scenes in this book that I enjoyed. But, and this is a Greek but, Cardan is trash. See, I understood where Cardan was coming from in Crow Prince. In the beginning, I resented him. By the end of Crow Prince, I actually loved him. I did not love him as much as Jude, because Jude is bae. Jude is my baby. Jude is my queen. But Cardan, I loved. Now, Cardan can choke. I do kind of figure out, I have a vague idea as to why he did what he did at the end of the book. I do know that I do actually have this vague idea. I might be right, I might be wrong. I think I'm most likely right. But he can still choke because he's trash. Like, Taryn, as always, is a bitch. I hope she drowns. Locke can choke on his own blood. I sincerely hope someone slits his throat in the third book, because I hope he chokes. Cardan is trash. Maddox is still Maddox. The love-hate relationship that, that Jude and Cardan have in the Crow Prince, I think it's kind of like, it's inverse. It's kind of like similar to our relationship with Maddox, because there's still that love-hate relationship with Maddox as well, except for the fact that with Cardan it's romantic and sexual, and with Maddox it's familial. But Maddox is Maddox. He does what Maddox does best, which is, I'm not even going to talk about Maddox. Cardan can choke. He's trash. Olak is, I hate her. Cardan is trash. Nicasia, bitch, bye. Cardan is trash. Belkin is, I thought we had seen the last of him in the Crow Prince. Turned out I was wrong. He has to consistently mess shit up, and he's so, I'm so fucking done. He can choke. Cardan is trash. Vivienne, I hope sincerely that, with the way things played out at the end of The Wicked King, she's finally learned a lesson. But I love her, and I know it's because I love her that I know that she's most likely not learned her lesson. So I'm so sorry, Vivienne. Cardan is trash. But basically, I finished this book, and this wrap up / whatever it is I'm doing right now is not going to make any sense, because I have thoughts, and my thoughts are not organized. They don't have any rhyme or reason. I just want to appreciate the fact that while The Crow Prince was about, was all about Jude becoming more Fae, even more than the Fae, The Wicked King was us seeing glimpses of our humanity and our vulnerability, and I enjoyed seeing those parts. That ending though, oh my god, fuck. Ola Black knows how to write a second book. What the fuck? I need the third book. Like, Queen of Nothing is going to step on my throat, and I will lay myself bare and accept it gladly, because what the fuck? What the actual fuck? As expected, this book gets a 5 stars and is also definitely going to be on my favorite books of 2019 list. So, yes. Next, I read my second graphic novel of the month, which was Black. Okay, so I would say that the premise sounded so intriguing. Like, Black people are the only people in the world with superpowers, and we find this out through the main protagonist, through which we're following the story, and that's Karim. Karim is unfortunately shot dead by police for loosely fitting the description of thieves that robbed the store. And I'm sorry, and when I say loosely, I mean loosely. Like, the only The person reporting the crime just said that, oh, okay, it were black boys wearing basketball shorts. That was it. Black people wearing basketball shorts. What the fuck? Anyway, Karim and his friends were shot. And while on his way to the morgue, he reawakens, and then he eventually told that, okay, this is the secret. Black people are the only people in the world that have superpowers. And then we're basically following Karim on this journey as he discovers his powers and learns to use them. And, you know, the bigger picture of, oh, there's this almost governmental like conspiracy where black people are being kidnapped and tortured or experimented on because of their powers. Like, the entire premise of this book sounded so good. The execution, however, fell flat, and I fell so flat I gave it a 2.5 stars. Now, the pacing, like, if I thought Abbott was rushed, Black was worse. There were so many characters, like a huge slew of characters. Every single plot point, we did not even dwell on them. Everything was resolved within the blink of an eye. Characters that we initially trusted all of a sudden suddenly had nebulous motives, and we did not, before we even had time to dwell on why. Why is it that Karim doesn't trust this person anymore? Is there a reason why? Is there anything, any clues we might have missed? We're immediately dropped into another plot line. Nothing gets resolved before another plot line is introduced, and then everything just coagulates into this huge mess, which is so sad because, like I said, the premise was so amazing, and like I said, there were so many characters, each with their hidden motives, so many different factions, everybody showing up in this first volume, and it was rushed, it was messy, it could have been so much better. I do have faith though that in the next volume, now that we've introduced, we know how this world works, we know who these characters are, at least we have a vague idea of who they are. I think that now we'll be able to have time to tell the story, and I hope that the volumes going forward gets better, because like I said, the premise was so good, and like, if this could be done well, it would be so, it will be fantastic. What I did really love about this comic though was the opening covers of each of the issues, because like I loved that each one of them told stories of police brutality against black bodies and black resistance as a result of that, and I loved it. I think that the covers are fantastic. Like, the covers for each of the issues was just hands down the best part of this comic. Next, I read this gem over here, The Poet X by Elizabeth Azevedo. Every other page of this book had something I loved. The lines, like the characterization, every single inch of this book for me was perfection. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. I love the fact that this entire book was written in verse, like not part of it, every single page of this book is in verse, and it just had me wishing I also I'm still going to get this on audio, because I still want to listen to it on audio, because it is going to be an experience. But I love The Poet X. Like, wow, Xiomara is me, she is me. I have never felt so seen or so heard in a book. Her tenacity, her ferocity, her refusal to back down, her refusal to be defined by what society expects her to be. I loved seeing, I love the fact that she was strong, but also vulnerable, and I love the fact that she was a 16-year-old girl who had to, mature faster than her age in order to protect herself and her twin brother. And I loved the fact that she always had questions. Like, there were questions she had about religion, about Catholicism, about God, that were also questions I have had. There are questions I still have. And I remember annotating those parts in those books and saying that, yes, this is me. These are the questions I've been asking. When will somebody give us these answers? I love the fact that Xiomara was juggling, staying loyal, doing what her parents said, but also finding out, like, also discovering herself. I love reading about her relationship with her man, her relationship with Caridad, her relationship with Javier. I love reading about her relationship with her mom. Like, there is something about mothers, especially strict mothers, and the damage they can cause to your psyche, and to finding out who you are. And when you realize that a lot of that is because of fear, is because they are genuinely afraid for you, but then they get so warped in their fear that they forget to show their love and their acceptance, and that in itself is damaging. And I just loved how that was depicted in this book, how that was shown in this book. I love the fact that, Elizabeth Acevedo showed, what it means when young girls, when our bodies develop so fast, especially at such a young age, and the resulting touches and stares and everything we have to deal with a body that is going out of control, with a body that catches the eyes of men, even though they should see and understand, not just men but men and boys, even though they should see and recognize that you're still a girl, you're still growing, you're still coming into your own. And like, that has been me. I developed so fast, like compared to so many of my classmates when I was back in school, when I was way younger, like pre-teenage me. And it just I had been Xiomara, uncomfortable in all these changes that were happening in my body and responding with rage and anger because of the fact that a lot of people took liberties because of what they felt, was owed to them. And I enjoyed reading that. I loved the fact that Xiomara calls out the fact that society, blames young girls for the changes that are going on in their body. Society keeps telling young girls the things that they should and should not be, rather than cautioning and talking to boys and talking to men. And I love that. I love reading that. I gave this a perfect 5 over 5 stars. Like, this book deserves more. It was that good. It made me cry so hard. And although I would admit that the ending was a bit rushed, like the things were resolved with her family like so fucking quickly, but it still does not take away from how much I love this book and how hard I cried and how much this book made me feel, which is why I'm giving it 5 stars. And I'm also looking forward to Elizabeth Acevedo's next book, which is coming out this year, with The Fire on Eye, because if this is a debut novel, she's going to kill me with The Fire on Eye. Kill me! And I'm glad for that. Next, I read Lilith's Brood by Octavia E. Butler. This is oh my god, like this book is massive. It's not massive, it's just about 746 pages. I think I've read books bigger than that, but this book was hard to read. I felt so many emotions while I was reading it. Pain, sadness, anger, resignation. I was numb. I was furious. I was depressed, lonely, happy for a few moments, and then reflective, because it had so much to say. And at the moment I was reading, it got to a point I just felt like I was an Oloi, trying to take in so many things that this book had to say to form a construct, that was a summation of everything I was experiencing with this book. Now, before I started, everybody was like, oh my god, you're going to love Lilith's Brood. Octavia E. Butler is fantastic and amazing, and I'm happy to say that they were right. I do love Lilith's Brood. Octavia E. Butler is a fantastic writer. Our ability, like our world building, our ability to create this totally alien but still human Earth was fantastic and fascinating to read. Now, what is this book about? Lilith's Brood, basically, humanity has always fucked up. We fucked up. We destroyed Earth with nuclear war, and then aliens came to save Earth, but not without a price, because they needed our gene. They needed our gene. They needed to fuse with us genetically in order to create a fusion of human and alien constructs that would help with the survival of the human species. Because like the alien said, our problem as a species is a hierarchical nature, in the sense that human beings have this need to prove their supremacy and their power over another group, usually through violence, and the reason why the wars keep happening. And also our intelligence. So we are intelligent people with a need to dominate others, and that is what has ultimately caused our destruction as a species. And the aliens are here to help, but not just help because it's a trade. They want something from us. They want our gene markers, and they also want they're offering us survival, and it's a case of, okay, so do we take survival or do we stand our ground? But the problem is that in standing our ground, who exactly is the villain in the story? Like, this is one of the first alien invasion story where I was solidly, okay, not solidly team, but most of the time I was team aliens, because human beings, as always, had to be humans. You know, not only do we react with anger and rage and this need to inflict hurt and pain and kill to the aliens, but we also started doing it to other human beings, and we were just kind of confirming what the aliens were saying ultimately. And it was actually quite interesting to read that from that perspective. And basically the whole question of, okay, is it strong? Like, this book dealt a lot with that question, that are we stronger for being adaptable, or is adaptability itself a weakness? And I guess to a society that is purely hierarchical, that lives for dominating others, being adaptable would be a flaw. But this is a book that has you questioning and asking yourself if adaptability is a flaw, because you had humans who adapted, and who mated with the alien race, and then you had humans that fought back against it. And then I just found it interesting, because I do believe that there is room for being adaptable, but there's also room for being able to stand by what you believe. But I'm not gonna lie, I was most of the time team alien. I do have a problem though, because as much as I think it's easier to understand why I was primarily team alien, because the aliens were offering peace and they were offering our survival, and a lot of the humans were meeting them with like rage. But then again, these are alien life forms who are taking away your world, who are taking away our world, who are taking away everything that makes us us, who are basically trading with us in quote for our survival. And a lot of these humans did not have a choice, although eventually they were given a choice. But how is it really a choice when ultimately your choice is not the choice you're given cuts you out of things? Like, that is my problem. It was not a full choice in itself, which was why a lot of the humans reacted the way they did. But then you do have some humans we meet in the later part of the book, when you see that, okay, do you know what, we are slowly evolving as a species, fingers crossed, although the aliens do still have their thoughts about it. I did enjoy the fact that this book was told from 3 different perspectives. Not 3 books were told from different perspectives, because this is basically 3 books in one. Lilith Wood has Dawn, Adult Rights, and Imago. Now, Dawn was told from the perspective of Lilith. Lilith is one of the first humans that was chosen to awaken all the other humans. So she had to teach them about the transformed earth, and basically how to merge with the alien life form, with the Oankali. And I love the fact that we went through the stages of all the stages of denial, refusal, before slowly coming into acceptance. But even with the acceptance, Lilith still did resent the Oankali for the decisions they are taking, and for who she eventually became. And I found that more believable, because although the Oankali were big on peace, and they basically always responded to human biological reactions and emotions, they still sometimes would veto your choice as a human being, because as far as they are concerned, that's not biologically what you want, because they can't read your biological responses. They felt it's somehow justified, and I appreciated the fact that the humans, especially Lilith, did resent them sometimes for it. So from Lilith's perspective, and it was through Lilith that we had to, we started that whole conversation about, are you stronger for being adaptable, or is being sticking to what you believe without giving any room for compromise, is that true strength? And then after Lilith, we have Adult Rights, which is Akin's story. Akin being one of her human construct Oankali children. Now, Akin, who starts off the story as being more human, visibly more human, does go through his metamorphosis and eventually looks less human, more alien, although internally he does keep his is human traits and attributes, and Akin takes the baton, you know, from talks about adaptability to should humanity needing choice, humanity and choice, just, and the fact that the choice of, okay, we are going to direct this about you and this about you, is not choice in itself. Choice with limitations is not choice. And if it is that we are setting ourselves for destruction, then we should be allowed to make those decisions ourselves. And then after Akin's part, we move on to Joda's part. Now Joda's is also Lilith's child, but now the Oloi human construct child. Now because yes, it does not identify as male or female, it is more alien, and the evolution happens so gradually that by the time we get to Joda's story, I'd stopped seeing this. I did not know when I started seeing the world through alien eyes, and Joda's is like the best of humanity and the best of Oankali together, and it represents the hope of what the future, the merger between both species would look like. Now I really enjoyed this. I gave this a 4.5 star over 5. The only reason why I did not give it a full 5 star was because, like I said, the Oankali seem to have a problem with consent, and it just sometimes it gave me rapey vibes, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm like, what the fuck, like what the fuck. But it's still a great story, and I did enjoy every moment of it. And finally, the last book I read this month is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. Now I chose this book for my as the body read for my Valentine's, and like Sarah of Nova Serendipity, she's my body read for this book, and we had so much fun reading the book. Like, we took our time and spread it out and read it over the month, and we just had conversations about it, and it's reading it with her, made me love the book even more. Now, what is Daughter of Smoke and Bone about? I do agree, like, when I was starting it, and the only thing someone told me was that you want to get into this blind, trust me, you do not want to know what this book is about. I was like, what the fuck? And then I read it, and I could see why, because telling the story kind of does spoil the book a bit, and this is a book you do not want to be spoiled for. Just know that it is fantastic. You will meet characters you would love. Carol is blue-haired with tattoos, and she's an artist, and she's loyal and loving and strong and badass, and also still willing to learn, and she's just so fucking talented and so fucking amazing, and I love her. I adore her. I love Brimstone. I love Brimstone with his teeth. Like, when you get to the end of the book and you understand the true price of magic and Brimstone's backstory, you are heartbroken. You're like, what the fuck? But then you love him even more, because you then understand exactly the depth of his love and his connection to Carol, and like, he's our father in every true sense of the word. In fact, Issa, Yasri, Twiga, these are our family, and like, I just love the characterization. I love Susanna. I love Mick. Susanna is beige, she's young, she's short, she's ferocious, she's just adorable. I love her. I used to love Akiva until we got to the end of this book, and fuck you, Akiva, fuck you. That's all I'm going to say. Like, that's all I'm going to say. I am certain he will probably redeem himself, because this is a trilogy, and I know they're going to get together, but I hope he suffers and I hope he pays. So yes, I definitely hope he suffers and I hope he pays. But Lainey's writing in this is just beautiful. It's easy to read, but at the same time so picturesque. Everything she's describing, both like when she's describing the Chimera and the Seraphim and even Prague, and you're trying to understand how and like the way she weaves the story and the way everything slowly unravels and unfolds, and you're like, holy shit, what the fuck? Like, your mind is blown. My mind is blown. All I know is that Carol should be protected. Carol deserves happiness. Carol deserves the world. And yes, I was about to say something, but I'm like, too much of a spoiler. But just, if you've not read Daughter of Smoke and Bone, read it. If this is an example of Lily Taylor's writing. I am so thankful that I have the Strange the Dreamer series, because I cannot wait to read. Like, I need more of her books in my life, which of course should give you an idea to know that I am definitely going to be reading Days of Blood and Starlight this month, because I need to know what happened. Those are the books I read in February, all 13 of them. Like I said, it was a pretty decent month. I read some great books, and I read some books that could be better, and I read some books that, you know, destroyed me and wrecked my existence, and that is just how I like it. Let me know down in the comments below, did you read any of the books I read? Did you enjoy them? Or have you read any of the books I read? Did you enjoy them? Let's talk about it. I want to know. If you like this video, please do not forget to give it a thumbs up. Check out my other videos. Subscribe if you want to. I make new videos every Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I will see you soon. Until then, stay passionate, love books, love yourself.